Peace up to the tribe. Welcome back to another episode here at the Artist Journal. This is your brother Samal here. And I already have two beautiful guests in the house today. We got J Cafe holding it down or holding it up. And also we have Ashun Bumi in the house. And also we have brother Don P is in the building. Give me 1 second, Don P. Don P, you there, brother?
Yes. I'm here. Greetings.
Okay, excellent.
To everyone.
So today, family, this is another one where we are going to speak a little bit to the disunity that we are seeing in the streets of YouTube and in the social media world over, pertaining to the African/African American presence or experience. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of connecting to Africa for our people, the so-called African American. Like I said, we have on the panel, we got brother Don P, a native of Kenya. Brother is fluent in Kemetic studies in African history. We have the beautiful artist in J Cafe, lives here on the ground in Kenya, doing her thing. Owner, CEO of Safi Sana. Oh yeah. And we have the beautiful Ashun Bumi, historian, African dancer, griot. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So I just wanted to lay the foundation for those of you who might not know the foundational Black American. It's a movement out of the Americas by Tariq Nasheed, and they feel like they are sovereign and an entity unto themselves, and they have a movement where they are delineating from all other people, right? So they are saying that, in fact, they are trying to dispel the out of Africa narrative, and they're saying that life in its fullness thereof started actually in the Americas. So I just want to speak a little bit
Peace, Don P.
Greetings, my sister Yaye. Beautiful name.
Greetings.
I guess we'll have to hold the fort down a little bit until they come back.
Yeah, let's hold it down. So
But
yeah.
Firstly, whereabouts in on the globe are you, my sister?
Yes, I'm in Temple Hills, Maryland. I'm on the diaspora,
Okay.
the African diaspora. So I'm so interested in what Baba, the Artist Journal, Samal was about to explain and continue to explain. We kick it back to you, Samal.
Great. Don P, you know what we struggle with here, the electricity, the power grid here is in and out sometime, Ashun Bumi, so you got to forgive me. So delving back into it, we just trying to spread some positivity, some good light, some good energy on the African slash so-called African American connection. And I want to highlight today what what Africa does for our people when they touch this soil. Ashumbumi, I know you've been to Senegal. I know you tapped in and, you feel the energy of Mama Africa. Myself and J Cafe been to Senegal. We've been to the Gambia, Morocco. So, and again, we're here in Kenya. So I just want to share some positivity in the midst of a seemingly spiraling out of control narrative. You know what I mean? That we don't like each other and we pitting, Africans don't like black people don't. I just want to nip these things in the bud as much as possible and as much as I can. So with all things, I want to say appreciate each and every one of you for coming on today and just spending a little bit of time with us. And J Cafe, if you can start off with sharing a little bit about what Africa means to you and how things been for you since being here.
Absolutely. So excited about this panel. It is such an important conversation for us to continue to have. It's just been an amazing journey. I've always known that I was of African descent. That's never been a question for me. I've always wanted to know more about my heritage and my culture. So just having the opportunity to not visit the continent, several different countries, but to repatriate here to Kenya has just been an amazing journey. You hear so many great things about the continent, but just being here, seeing the bright colors, the beautiful people, it's amazing. And just the way that we have been embraced from being here. I think I want to say at least once a week, I'm approached by a Kenyan that thinks that I'm from either Kenya or another African country. So that right there, it just further validates the fact that I am of African descent. Like, they are floored that I'm not either Kenyan. I've even been told what tribe I look like by multiple people, the same tribe, the Taita tribe here in Kenya. So it's like, it's just heartwarming to know that, yes, I know I'm from the continent, but the people here on the continent that have been born here and raised here think that they know that I'm from this continent as well. So it's very disheartening when I see things online from the FBA and African just back and forth. It just testament to the programming and how successful it has been to this day. So conversations like this, panels like this, if they continue to happen, I think we'll get to a point where we can break down those barriers and just be able to understand both perspective from both sides.
Absolutely, well said. And let me say this though, everyone that claims the FBA piece is like, not all of them are like super negative. They just feel like America is it and they are from there and that's what it is. You know what I mean? So I'm not up here saying that all of them are just extremely negative and don't like Africans. And I'm not saying that, but for those that find it necessary to come on platforms like ours and just spread toxic energy, this conversation is for them. You know what I mean? Ashumbumi, peace up, my sister.
Peace and blessings, family. I just want to give my deepest honor and gratitude to each and every one of you all, your spirit guides, just the journeys that you all have been on. It's just an honor and a blessing to be able to share virtual space. Thank you so much to the Artist Journal for having us, Samal, for your visionary work, and for just being who you are, but also being consistent. Samal is an African who's consistent. He's been the same since I met him in all the best ways. And it's so beautiful to see how you have continued to exponentially, right, build upon that core, which is dedicated to the liberation and the freedom of African people, no matter where we may be found in the known multiverse. So that leads me to my next thought, which is that I have so much love and adoration for all of the ways that our people have tried to cohere with the calamity of us feeling disconnected from the asili, right? Like the root, the source, or the base of our existence due to colonial problems and white intervention. And so I think I have lots of grace. There have been so many movements over time. When you sit and you study us, what we do, how we thought, how we created, how we built from the test of time. There was always an African building an island somewhere with some Africans to say, hey, we think differently about this and we got it figured out, right? So all of it is this divine quest, right, for folks to claw and gnaw towards truth and justice and order, right? And everybody has opinions about who's doing it right and who's doing it wrong and who's most close to right. And I think that ultimately, when we look at movements that have maintained, I think the widest unity, right? The greatest capacity in numbers and in scale. What they did is that they created an umbrella that was broad enough, right? For folks of all different kinds of beliefs, strategies, methods, ideals, right? Commitments and values to be able to unite under the fact that, guess what? We have something DNA. Something about this DNA is connected, okay? And that means that you belong. And so the thing about belonging, one of the major pieces about my life's work right now is that I am belonging building. I've realized, like, we have this homelessness syndrome, political homelessness, spiritual homelessness, ideological homelessness, where folks always feel isolated and feel like people just don't quite get them, or they haven't found a place that where they can just rest and where they feel like they're understood and where they can say yes to everything, right? And this thing about belonging is you're not going to ever find a place where you say yes to all the things, right? But belonging also speaks to this idea of cultivating a space where people feel that they can grow some roots, right? They can tether, right? And that they can be brave on the way to feeling safe, right? And so I think ultimately, when I look at Tariq Nasheed, the brother has a very interesting track record with his work. And we're grateful for the ways that Spirit has used him. We are grateful, right? And so I am not surprised when I see what is happening right now with the so-called FB and the A. I do think that he's tapping into something that ancestrally has been done over and over and time again. We have been a part of every type of sect, community, affinity group, right? That you could possibly think of. This is just another one. But again, it's something about those movements and those spaces that figured out that belonging has to cast a wide net. We have to wrap our arms around as many people, right? Africans, right? That we can. And to allow them to be able to say, you know what? I don't agree with everything. You know what? Sometimes, right, I may not feel my best in this space, but it's still ours. And so I'm just really inspired by the audacity of this brother to just create something new, to galvanize and organize people, right? And I'm excited for what is to come, right? As people are awakened, one thing you begin to see in movements is that people, they learn and they grow and they expand, right? And sometimes when they feel like they have to contract, that's when folks walk away from movements. So the thing I'm interested to see is what is the conversation around the FBA in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years? I'm also interested to see the people, because we got to look at the long arc. We know that we're never linear, right? As Africans, that hasn't served us linear. So if we're looking at this as, you know, a long arc, right? And if it's a cycle that's happening, what we know is people are awakened, they're mobilized, they're organized into something that they feel fervently about, right? And they're willing to let it all hang out for whatever it is they believe in at that moment, until that ain't the thing no more, right? And so there may be some Africans, when we hear their story 10, 15 years from now, they may say, I was a devout follower of the FBA, right? And then they say, and then I learned, and then I grew, right? And I'm excited about how they're going to finish that sentence, because what I'm interested in is what is going to be available for folks, right? To be able to walk into, to be able to create, to be able to reimagine, to be able to be a part of, when the thing that we know right now is a little short-sighted, like the FBA, right? Because it is isolationist, right? So when we see that thing kind of have its fizzle, where are people going next, right? And what are the alternatives? And how are we a soft landing for folks to not have them come and feel judged by the Africans that already knew that that wasn't going to work, but to come and be able to join and unite with something that's going to have resilience and tenacity against the test of times, right? And we know that anything that is focusing on our difference and not our commonality is not going to last the test of time.
Yeah, I'm with Ashumbumi, I'm with you 100%. And it's ironic and funny that he's in your stomping grounds. He was in Senegal doing his thing. So for me, just his presence there is stirring up a lot of, Yeah, so Don P, you up next, my good brother. We just tied this conversation into last week's build that me and you had. And I just wanted to further the conversation and bring new faces onto the panel. So Don P, what are some of your thoughts, my good brother?
First of all, greetings, Brother Samal. Greetings to J Cafe and the sister who has joined us. And you just confirm your beautiful name again. Oh, sorry, your name doesn't pop up on my screen for some reason. But I give thanks to our ancestors for convening us together and having us go over these very important topics. Hopefully we can raise the vibration for some of those who may have some doubts as to our motives or whatever their thought processes might be. But everybody's made very valid points. And, the thing with the FBA and the Foundation of Black Americans is, it's a Central African tenet that, we are informed by the concept of Sankofa. So, you have to look back to inform you as to the direction that you're going to. And if you look at the history of humanity, usually these kind of beliefs and religious systems spring up as a kind of a rebellious act, or an act of trying to find some sort of self-identity. So, you have to be informed by what preceded you, and what preceded you were the cultures of your ancestors, and a lot of the times people don't really appreciate that because they think, this ancestral veneration, it's not as wishy-washy or as spiritually kind of lightweight as a lot of people try and make it out to be, because you can even describe the importance of your ancestors in terms of something called epigenetics, which is basically the trauma that is carried within our blood, within our genes, over the centuries and millennia, over the things that happened. So like, why is it that a lot of Black people have a fear of water? Why is it that there's this stigma that is carried, or this kind of a stereotype that Black people are not good swimmers? A lot of that has to do with the transatlantic slave trade. And a lot of people don't even know that prior to that, Africans, and specifically West Africans from the area that the sister is in. Sorry, my sister, I want to get your name spot on. Is it, what's, remind me your name again?
Samal calls me Oshumbumi.
Like where Oshumbumi is based. The best swimmers came actually from that part of the world, Senegambia, because they were the ones who went to retrieve, the treasures from ships that, had sunk off the coast. So like the colonizers from Portugal at the time would employ African swimmers to come and retrieve their sunken treasures. But because of the slave trade and the transatlantic slave trade, we developed a fear of water and things like that. So I'm just giving you an example of the links between our ancestors and us, and why, like stereotypes such as, Black people can't swim, or why do Black people fear water? So like, for me, for example, I came from my father and my mother, both who have now transitioned to the ancestral realm. And they came from their fathers and their mothers, and they came from their fathers and their mothers. The only thing that's dividing me from my ancestors now is that thing called life and death. So there's actually more than just a spiritual link. There's actually a genetic link spiritually to those people who have left before us. And so for us to discard all of that and to come up with something new. It's understandable because people who have had their identity stripped away from them because of a Holocaust that was committed upon our people hundreds of years ago and still continues to this day, they will always look for an identity. And if you do not have that principle of Sankofa, and if there's a disconnect between you and your ancestors to inform you of the cultures, customs, and traditions that were taken away from you from the colonizer, you will always look for an identity. And because you're always looking for an identity, people will come along, whether they be charlatans or not. They may even have the best of intentions. They will always look for something to formulate in order to give them that identity. And hence you get these things like foundational Black Americans and African descendants of slavery, whatever you want to call them, because they have been stripped of their heritage. So it's understandable. And once we come to this kind of mindset of trying to understand why people formulate the ideas that they have, then instead of judging them or trying to attack them immediately and have them attack us, we have to come from a point of understanding. People who have been traumatized and have had their names taken away from them are constantly seeking for something to call their own. And I feel that all that the FBA are really trying to do is to try and find that family, like my sister was saying that. They're trying to find a sense of family. That's what gang culture is in the States. That's what Bloods and Crips were in the States. Originally they formed to protect themselves from those people who were worried about property values in Compton and South Central and places like that. And it's only when the same colonizer came and introduced drugs and guns to the system that they became much more territorial and violent. So as Black people, and especially our brothers and sisters who were taken away from us in this continent to serve the Western colonial masters, we're always looking for that identity. We're always looking for a sense of belonging. And so FBAs is something, it's understandable how that came about. But they also have to remember that once you disconnect yourself from your ancestral roots, you're losing a very, very big chunk of your heritage. And all we're trying to do is help you claim that in the most humblest way. We're not trying to claim that we have all the answers. We're just trying to provide you with enough questions so that maybe you can see things from the way that we are trying to articulate them.
Don P, have you seen the movie Sankofa?
I wasn't even aware that there was a movie, but Sankofa is something that we grew up with here in Africa, so Yeah,
the Rasta Farai brother from Jamaica, Muta Baruka. He was in the movie, and it was centered around an African American woman that was on sacred land in Ghana. She was up in Cape Coast, one of the dungeons. And she was, being real promiscuous and flaunting her body around. And she went into one of the dungeons, and she looked up and she saw a priest, looked her right in her eyes, and then she started running, ran in the dungeon, bumped her head, and she woke up back in slavery. So she went through all of the trials and tribulation of being in slavery. Long story short, she developed a warrior type energy about her, warrior spirit that was always in her, but she forgot. She forgot who she was. And in the thick of the movie, she's fighting and, she ended up dying. But when she died, the Sankofa bird brought her back to that same beach that she was flaunting herself. And she understood what you were saying earlier. Sankofa is to be able to go back to your past and to remember, to call to memory who and what you are. You understand? So that came to my mind when you mentioned Sankofa, So J Cafe, Jessica, let me ask you, when was your wake-up call? When in fact that you started to understand that Africa was a necessity for you. that you wanted to make the connection. You know what I mean?
Oh, you're on mute, sister. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? I said, I think that
Yeah.
honestly that the curiosity has always been there. I've always understood that I was of African descent, and it was never a question for me. When and how I would make my way back to the continent was unknown, but I knew it was something that I definitely wanted to do. I think for us in America, it's a lot of miseducation, lack of education, and just programming. So for that reason, even just expressing to family and friends that you and I were moving here to Kenya, we were faced with a lot of fear as far as what will you do there? Is it safe? How will you live?
Right.
Will you have internet? And this is, you know, in 2025, and we're still programmed to think that Africa is this place where everyone lives in huts. It's not developed, and that is just not the case. And honestly, it's just from a lack of education. So to answer your question, I was always aware, and it just was continual curiosity, education, and just been blessed with the opportunity to repatriate here, and it's been a beautiful experience.
Yeah, just going over like some of ISO Speed's material when he was here and looking at the responses of young people in America, a lot of them to what you're saying, like they assuming that Africa was backwards, people living in huts, and to only ISO Speed is to showcase a whole different reality, like Ethiopia, Ghana, like Senegal, all of these places are progressive environments with nice infrastructures. You know what I mean? With a lot of bustling culture and tradition. You know what I mean? So I feel you on
Yeah.
that. I shouldn't bore
And I
me.
think the thing, one last piece I wanted to say, the thing that is so interesting to me is we're faced with these questions like, is it safe? Are you going to be okay? Watch out. When we live in a place that is steeped in
Right.
violence, it's so violent, horrendous, scary every single day. Yet when we express that we want to move somewhere that is conducive to family, safety, community, you know, we're asked questions like, how will you survive there? And so that also is a testament just to the programming. It's wild
Yeah.
to me. Like I think what we were saying, like within the first 2 months of us moving here in Kenya, there were like 20 something murders in DC within like a 60-day period. And yet people are still calling us saying, be safe out there. Hope y'all are safe. And we're like, do you know where you live? Are you watching the news? So it's just interesting to me.
Yeah. I never understood that. I never understood that. I shouldn't bore me. When I'm gonna ask you the same question, I've known you for the last, what we gonna say, 14, 15 years? And ever since I've known you, you were steeped in African culture, you know, dancing, singing, doing your thing. When was your wake up call? And how did it happen? If you can share with the family.
Yes, I appreciate this question. I always love when spirit takes my throat chakra and it's like, this is what you gonna say, daughter, right? I'm like, oh Lord, I haven't told this story yet. Okay. I don't think I've ever told this story that I'm about to tell. Usually I speak about when all of the curiosity and the love and the pain came to a nexus. That was at Howard University for me. But there's a you know, there's a stop in the story that happened before that. I graduated high school in Norfolk, Virginia, and I knew at that time that I wanted to fight for oppressed communities. That was in my language when I graduated high school. I was like, The world ain't right. I want to be a part of making it better. And I felt like the vehicle to be able to do that was through law. I wanted to be a defense attorney. I wanted to help returning citizens, right? To be able to come back into society, fight whatever case the system had put on them, and to be able to return and not be locked away, not be rotting in somebody's cage, and to be rehumanized. I was like, I got to get people off, right? This was my thought process. I was like, because the reason why these crimes have been committed, right? Who knows? But I said, basically, we know the system is really on trial. And I was like, we got to get the people off, right? So I already had an abolitionist mindset coming out of high school. In pursuit of that dream, I became a victim's witness associate for the Commonwealth Attorney in Norfolk's office. I needed to kind of be in a courtroom, see how I moved. So I was helping the victims and witnesses of cases to be able to move through the judicial process, witness protection, all of that, right? And it was my first time, I'll never forget this case. It was 4 Black men that were being charged with armed robbery, assault and battery, and it was one more charge that they had. And they were brought from the back of the holding cell. They were chained at their hands and their feet, and they were chained together. So they were waddling, right? Because they didn't have proper, movement of their legs, and they were like chained one to the other, to the other, to the other. And the nature of my job, I had to be on my phone a lot because I had to communicate with people when they were showing up to the court office, how to park, where to be. So I'm sitting in the back of the, the courtroom, and I'm down and I'm messaging my client, and I look up and I screamed, right? And the judge was like, order in the court, right? And by that time, because I was a regular because of my job, she was like, order in the court, and she was like, at that time, Miss Cross, be quiet. And I was like, oh my God, so I started crying and I left the courtroom. I quit the job that day. I ran for my life because I looked up and I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is enslavement. I've seen this before, So that's when I went off to go apply for Howard. Now that part of the story I tell all the time. This next part I don't tell all the time. I applied for Howard, didn't get in. Went to Tidewater Community College for a year. And there was this professor, white man, that wore only dashikis, best African garb. Let me tell you something. He had his dashikis, he had his traditional garb from head to toe. This man was dripped, okay? And so I remember just being like, what is up with this man? He taught us about the Trail of Tears. He taught us about, at that time, before people were even using this language, manufactured consent. He was speaking about the media and the propaganda and how, they create a vortex of images and ideals, narratives, and they lay it out for you so that by the time you finish, you like this, mouth open, saying, right? Because you've just eaten it all up, right? And they took your mind from you, right? He taught us about that. He then gave us an assignment. The assignment was to go to the Umoja Festival. The Umoja Festival in Norfolk, Virginia. I had never been. And he told us that we had extra credit. And the extra credit was to find an African mask, to understand where it came from, what is the significance of it, what is the dialogue that people have with it, what does it bless and do, right? What is the spiritual technology behind the mask? Now, I'm writing these words. I'm like, spiritual technology behind the mask. Okay. He's like, who does it belong to? Right? Where did it come from? When was it stolen? Right? I'm like, whoa, right? So you said something, Brother Don. Am I getting that right? Brother Don, you said something about the questions we asked, right? It was the questions he had us asking, right? Where I was like, okay, there's a lot of inferences behind these questions, right? And so I went to go do my assignment. And I remember coming back. I got an A on the assignment. I learned a whole bunch of stuff, right, about, this specific ethnic group. The mask was from the Dogon. That took me into a world, right, of new understanding, right? It was like, okay, there's the Dogon, there's astrological science, there's, a mama, who looked at the Dogonic, cosmogony and wrote a book called Urugu, right? This was a whole, now we into Marimba Ani, right? There's a huge awakening, okay? So my world was taken by storm. But the deepest thing that I think made me understand that I could never go back to acting like I didn't know was when we got back, one of the closing sermons, because he used to preach and teach in sermons. One of the last sermons of our final course with this white man, he explained to us about his family lineage, that he comes from the Harvard lineage. He explained to us about the havoc that his brothers and sisters was wreaking on the world, and how they were, right-wing authoritarian conservatives that, was a part of old Harvard money, and how he was the white sheep of the family who changed his life and wanted to do right by the people and teach the truth. I mean, I was mind blown. Okay. And this man then went on to tell us about a plane ride he took. And he spoke to us about, in the 757 area, there's a conglomerate that owns most of the media, and it's called Cox Cable. And so he talked to us about how he rode with the owner of Cox Cable because he's a family friend. And when they were about to land on this private jet, the friend looked over to the professor and said, "You see all these lights? See these lights in these houses?" And, professor says, "Yeah, I see them." He says, "I own those people." He says, "What they're watching, what they're up to right now," he said, "those lights," he said, "they're watching. You better believe that." He said, "And they're watching what I have a hand in allowing them to see." And he said, "I plan to own many more homes and many more hearts and many more minds and many more children and many more people. And that's going to be my legacy. And I will never forget that." From that moment on, I went to reapply back to Howard, got in this time. And I was like, listen, I told them at the administration desk, I said, "I just need to study everything African and everything Black that you got. Give it to me, right? Because I need to understand how we can never be owned again. How no person riding on some plane is going to be telling people about how they're going to own our bodies and our minds and our hearts and our babies, right? How I don't ever have to see these brothers in shackles and chains trying to fight some case. By the way, those brothers ended up getting off, and they were not guilty of the crime that they were incarcerated for. And they were incarcerated for over a year, struggling through the judicial system to wait to get a fair trial, and they were innocent, right? So it was the conviction behind these kinds of stories, right? Usually I tell the short story, but this is the longer form, right? That all led to me saying, my work, my drive, my heart is set on freedom, and I can no longer act like I don't know. I can no longer be deaf, dumb, and blind, right? Because our mere survival, it is actually tied, right, to our ability to see and hear and think properly and in alignment with our ancestry.
Absolutely. Well said. Appreciate that, Queen. Don P., we know you spent a lot of time in the UK. Is it about 20 years?
Yeah, 17 years. Yeah, 17 years.
Got you. I know that you study a lot of Kemetic material. Let me ask you the same question. When was the turning point for you? Was it early on in Kenya, or was it something that kind of like light bulb moment went off when you was in the UK?
Funnily enough, both. And it's incredible, because my sister in West Africa, her story is very, very, very similar to mine. And that's why I always say, like, coincidence is the language of the ancestors, because that, it's almost uncanny. But so for me, my awakening really happened very, very early, like when I was about maybe 13. But it wasn't a full blossoming. I wouldn't call it a full awakening. So what happened was, I'm 47 now, and that was around 1991 during the first Gulf War. And I have an older sister who at the time had just become a born-again Christian. And I remember distinctly watching a speech by George Bush Sr. talking about the New World Order. And funnily enough, that speech was given on September 11th, 1991. And September 11th just happened to be the Kemetic New Year. And so he was talking about the New World Order and how everything is going to come together and all this kind of stuff. And I was 13 at the time. And my older sister brought a videotape of a preacher from New Zealand called Barry Smith. Now, one of the links that I have with my sister in West Africa and myself is a lot of the times along the way, it's taken white people to awaken me to my own African consciousness. So, but the thing is, he was coming from a Christian perspective. And he was talking about this, what George Bush is talking about with this New World Order. He's really just trying to corral us into this one world government system, et cetera, et cetera. So in essence, I became somewhat of a conspiracy theorist because, I looked at the Bible in a different way. And he was talking about the book of Revelations. So I started studying the book of Revelations and reading that and questioning my sister and my parents. I have 4 other siblings, 3 sisters and an older brother. I'm the 4th of 5. We're all very close to this day. So we had these discussions about, what the Bible means and everything. And so I started to question the Bible from an early age, but I could see that there was something that was deeper than the message that was being portrayed in the Bible in terms of, the Savior, Jesus Christ and whatnot. So fast forward to a few years after that, when I started questioning the Bible, and then I see these passages of the Pharaoh and how the Pharaoh is depicted in the Bible in terms of this, let my people go and whatnot. So I ended up going to the UK to study law, just like my sister. Because in the meantime, I remember reading about this case and following this case, which you all probably know about the Central Park 5 and the injustice that happened. I think it was around 1989. And ironically enough, the now president of the United States had a lot to say about those 5 kids who were wrongly convicted of rapes and murders that they didn't commit, Donald Trump, And so anyway, that got me onto kind of like the arc of wanting to pursue justice for those who have been wronged by the judicial system. So I went and studied law in the UK. Now, the reason why I went to study law in the UK, because I wasn't doing so well. Of all my siblings, academically, I was not doing well in the Kenyan system. And my parents were lucky enough and in a fortunate enough position to send me to a British system school because they thought maybe if we change the system of education that he has, it will help him academically. Because I was a sports guy. I was not academically inclined at all. I just wanted to go to school and play sports, and I became very good at like sports stuff. So I went, studied in the British system, ended up going to the UK to study law in the University of London. And that just for the whole sake of trying to help those who have been unjustly pursued in whatever way. And also because I love words, I'm a writer, and I liked the whole aspect of studying statutory law and common law and, what words hold in terms of their weight, in terms of how we interpret words. And that was purely from an academic standpoint. And I didn't realize at that point that the real power of words and this occulted language that we called English, and how words actually carry much more weight. So even back then, the ancestors knew. He might not stay a lawyer, but let him have an appreciation of what words actually mean. So I studied law in London. And to my sister's point, when she talks about like, the white man in the daishikis, for me, it's like my ancestors knew that they had to send me to London because London basically is the center of information in the world. And those are our colonizers. And if you want to look for a lot of the things that they pilfered from us and stole from us, you have to go to places like the British Museum and the British Library. And having studied in the British system of education, so we were, taught things like, Russian history, how the Russian Revolution came about, some aspects of the American history as well, but mainly European history, Russian history. So I learned all other histories. And the last history that I became informed about was the history of my own continent in Africa. So so basically, after a long period of time, I discovered, there's a reason why lawyers and liars are not too far off phonetically in terms of the way they sound, and it's a very cutthroat industry. So law wasn't for me. And I decided to take my activism to a more kind of a more political arc. So I became one of these, Black power, Black consciousness people who was all about like the empowerment of our people. And I became an anarchist. Now, anarchism basically just means no masters, no borders. We don't believe in the system of politics that happens anymore. And I became very autonomous in terms of wanting to just help people in London. And how that helped me in terms of my spiritual growth was we were kind of living off grid in London. So like we would do these things like, they have squatting laws in London. So we would go around London in the middle of the night, opening up empty buildings for the homeless. Sometimes you'd get arrested, sometimes you wouldn't get arrested. But because there's a very, very big homelessness problem in London, we used to go around with our anarchist brothers and sisters, opening up these homes so that the homeless could have places to live in. And I was the only Black person in my whole circle of friends. We had people from Greece, from Italy, from Spain, from the UK, of course, even from America. But I was the only Black person. And these are the people who kind of introduced me into this whole thought process of anarchism. No masters, no borders. Nobody's above the other. The political system is designed in a way to oppress all of us. And so I got into that for a very long time. And then I read a book called The Way, or The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, which is 5,000 years old. And it talked about, moving in harmony with nature. And corresponding to that, I also got into the Rastafarian community at the same time. And I noticed that the principles were very same: living in harmony with nature, the principles of nature, balance, reciprocity. And then at the same time, almost at the same time, I read a book called The Secret by Robert Byrne, talking about manifesting your own reality and all of this kind of thing. So when I started reading all of these things and coming together, I was like, oh, okay. And then there was a radio station. It was called Blessed Radio, which had all of these speakers. This is the first time I heard Marcus Garvey. I knew about Malcolm X before. I was always a Malcolm guy, but I started listening to Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Mirimban Ali has been talked about here as well. So I got into that whole Black consciousness thing. And then I started studying the Bible a bit deeper. And I said, this Bible. I even became a born-again Christian for a while because I was just looking. And then I realized that I don't really know about my own history and my continent, really. So I started studying about the pharaohs and Imhotep specifically, master healer, polyglot. And then I realized after some time that the story of Joseph was the story of Imhotep. Now, to carry a long story short, I got into Kemetic studies from another coincidence. A brother of mine who had been in the same class as my sister in primary school here in Kenya became an initiate of the Kemetic temples of the Dogon. Now, many people don't realize that the Dogon are the wisdom keepers. The word Dogon actually comes from the West African word Dogoimba, which means the landlords. And the reason that they're called the landlords is because they are they were entrusted with the safekeeping of the spiritual knowledge that was handed out from our ancestors since the days of the pyramids. These are the pyramid builders. We are the pyramid builders. So they got, he got in touch with me because he heard, hey, didn't you go to school with my sister? I was like, yeah. I hear that you're involved in a lot of these spiritual studies. So I got into, I became an initiate of the Dogon. And I learned directly from Dogon priests and still do to this day. I started in 2021. I got my Kemetic name, which is Zwaji. And how they do that is they interrogate the earth. People don't realize the earth is literally called Mother Earth because it's the repository of all information. And so I got my Kemetic name from them, just from studying this ancient secret knowledge. And people don't realize those mystery temples that they talk about in the Bible, they still exist to this day. And we just have to look for it and search for it. So apologies for going on for a long time, but basically that's kind of like the journey that my spiritual um, awakening took.
Got you, Don P. Got you. Appreciate you. What was the name of that book that you say you read early on?
Oh, it's called The Way. So that's the Chinese. It's the Tao Te Ching, or the Tao Te Ching, they say in English. But it's by Lao Tzu, and it's 5,000 years old. It predates the Bible by 2,000 years, and a lot of the principles in terms of the Bible and many other religious systems come from that Lao Tzu. But of course, even that book, Lao Tzu, came from Kemet, came from the motherland anyway. You know, that's why
Excellent.
the first Chinese emperors were actually black. But yeah, the Way, Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching.
Excellent, excellent. So, family, we're going to look to close out. But before we do, I want to go around and kind of speak to, in this world today, is a lot of confusion out here. You got the Hebrew Israelites, you got Rastafarian, you got Baha'i community, Christianity, many sects of Islam. Our people are all over the place. So if someone was listening in today and they just want a little direction as to what it is that I should be studying, what should my focus be in a world that's full of confusion, a world that's full of information. Like somebody may not know where to turn, where to go, how to do. You know, and we start with you, Ashun Bumi, in closing. What would be something that you would impart upon someone to, you know, as if, I guess that's my question. What would you advise somebody to? Maybe it can be a book or a lecture or anything. What would you share with someone that's looking for some direction?
I just thank y'all so much for this time, and I thank you so much for this platform. I mean, I wish I had a this when I was searching, right? I wish I had a this to tap into, this conversation to tap into when I was searching. A few things come to mind. One is we always have to study and understand the pathology, right, that has been impressed upon us. Why? Because we can never underestimate our opponent. And so I would tell folks first and foremost, this is not inspirational, but it's foundational, which is to read the Willie Lynch letter. Read that. Read what Willie Lynch was up to, what he thought, the ideology, and begin to dissect and discern how one has taken on white pseudo supremacy characteristics in one's own engagements with self and with others. One thing I always tell folks is you can understand everything you need to understand about a person, an entity, or institution based on how they solve conflict or not. And one of the things that make it so that we have to have so many different spaces for people to want to belong is because folks have maybe tried or not tried, but when they have tried to be a part of different spaces, it is all of the isms, right? And the internalized traumas, pains, oppressive systems inside of us, the little white Karen, the little white girl or white boy inside of each and every one of us that oftentimes can make community very, very hard. That can make building resilient organizations or institutions, resilient partnerships, resilient relationships very hard, harsh, harmful, painful, right? So it's like when in what is the word? What is this book that I want to say? In Carter G. Woodson's give me the words, y'all.
The Miseducation of the Negro, I think.
Yeah. And Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro, another foundational piece. Go check it out. When they talk about when the door is now opened for us to walk through, that we would then go create our own back door again, because that is how we are conditioned. Reading Willie Lynch, reading things like The Miseducation, it helps us to understand conditioning so that we can undo it, right? We cannot undo something that we are unaware of. The other thing I could say on a instructional tip, right? So somebody says, okay, everything's bad. We know it. The world's on fire. We got problems. You know, we're pained. We've been pathologized. But what about our beauty? What about our tenacity? What about our light? What about, you know what I'm saying, all of the greatness of who we are that's holding us together? Because I'm going to tell you right now, and you don't need a book to tell you this. If you are of African descent and you are living, breathing, walking, okay, and if you are in any way, shape, or form feeling your sanity at any time throughout the day, you are a walking miracle. Because there are people with names and addresses 365, 24/7 that are working to unravel us, to see us undone, to see us buried, to see us crazy, to see us jailed, to see us annihilated. Okay. And they are working right now as we are talking about our freedom and the ideas about our freedom. They are working to undo us. Okay. Obliterate. So you are a miracle. If you just start from there, you didn't do half the battle to reclaim your worthiness, the fact that you're deserving, right? The fact that you are, just even the idea of saying, I would tell every person of African descent, just say every day, I'm human. I'm human. I'm human. Just say it in the mirror, right? Because then that is you are deprogramming the idea that you are not human, that you don't deserve to be human, that you don't get to have all human things, thoughts, ideals, concerns, worries, right? All the things. You're human. You're a miracle. You're worthy. You're deserving. And therefore, so are all the other people around you. The other thing I'm going to say to you, treat yourself and others like you are God's baby. What do I mean? Before you come out your mouth sideways, before you decide to turn your energy, your thought, speech, or your actions in any type of negative way towards your brother or your sister, right? Just remember, I'm interacting with one of God's babies, right? Like, who am I to have any ill will, intent, concern, issue, problems with one of God's babies? Like, the level of grace that we have to survive, right? The third dimension and holding human technology. This is technology. You hold a human form. There's people that say, oh, this is not for me, and they go early, right? People say, oh, this is too much to hold human form. This is a spirit in this technology, right? And the spirit sometimes says, I don't got time for this. Let me go back and go frolic, right? But you're here. You're doing it every day. Bless you. Use that energy to bless others too, right? And the thing I was going to say about the I have so much to say, but I'll end it here. The thing I was going to say about the text that I would say changed my whole life. It gave me instructions, tangible tools. It gave me what to do and what not to do. It was Neely Fuller Jr.'s. It's the United Compensatory System Code/Concept. Stick with me. A textbook or workbooks for victims of white supremacy. He does say white supremacy because that's what they believe it is. It's not real. It's not real. However, that's the name of the book. It's the Bible. You want the Bible? That's the Bible. And what it does is it gives you tangible stops, right? He tells us, stop snitching, stop using profanity, stop robbing, stop stealing, stop, right? So the basic stops, right? And it helps us to understand in all the areas of people activity, education, economics, entertainment, labor, law, sex, war, politics, religion. I add health and relationships. Those are two that I add those two at the end. But he gives every single area of human existence, the activities that everybody is a part of, whether you want to be or not. And he says, how does the twin lies of white supremacy and African Black inferiority play on all of those systems? Right? You will not leave that book without your eyes peeled, okay? And your heart ready to do something different because we have to reimagine. The other thing I can say, y'all, is I work in politics. I run a national political party. And I'm going to tell y'all something right now. These people that y'all think are so smart and got it all figured out and that's running these systems of mass distraction and even the systems of liberation and power building, they making it all up. Let me tell y'all something. Nobody has it figured out. People are deciding. You understand? Like how Samal built this platform. Like how my sister, leader, Cafe Sister, right, is building what she's building out of her life force energy. All of what Brother Don has done. People are creating world building. They are making worlds off of the volition of their spirit guides, the ancestral insights, and what it is that they feel like doing on that day. And what we're hoping and praying is that when you decide to do that for you, and as we continue to do that together in unity, that we are thinking about how we serve the people and the planet with every single decision that we make. But I'm gonna tell y'all, everything that exists right now is because somebody fought for it, they prayed for it, they envisioned it, right? And they made it tangible, right? By the grace of God. And so, listen, we are with y'all. We love y'all. We don't have to know you personally. We know we love you and we respect you. Don't we love and respect them, y'all? We love you.
Absolutely.
We respect you, right? And we believe in you and we believe in us. So let's do it.
Shumbumi, I haven't forgotten. We need to put that trip together.
Yes.
For Kenya.
Yes.
We got to do that. We got to do that. Fire response. Appreciate that. The beautiful J Cafe, Jessica. You got 8 billion people watching you today.
Yes, thank you for that. At first, I agree wholeheartedly with the Queen Ashumbuni. First is acknowledging the programming and the conditioning. That's step one. And second from that is just undoing that conditioning and that programming. And the conversation that comes to mind is the conversation that Samal and I had this afternoon with a lovely couple. They are Kenyan. However, they moved to the States. They lived in the United States for 20 years, and now they are back in Kenya. And they were expressing the conversation of religion came up, and they were expressing that they, at a point, were Christians and Pentecostal and this, and it did not resonate with them. And what they found is that they need to tap back into their ancestry, back into their ancestral culture, beliefs, practices. And I think once we, one, first understand the conditioning, two, we need to do the same exact thing. And like Don P said, the FBA is as a result of us just trying to find our identity that we were stripped of. So we come up with our own hip hop culture and clothes and food. But when we peel back that onion and look at those things that we have adapted and adopted and quote unquote created, all of it roots back to the continent. From our music, our dance, our singing, our clothes, our swag, it's all from the continent. So once we realize that we're not we're not creating these things or just establishing our own identity, we are tapping into our ancestry. I think we will become in a better place. You know, understand? So I think one thing is when we're on the internet and we see the infighting between, you know, Africans and FBA and this, I honestly don't think it's as big of a deal as what it portrays to be online, because just from being here, I've seen so many people that were born in America that have repatriated to the continent in every single country. It's so many of us here. So I think once we realize, one, it is something that needs to be addressed. We do need to educate each other, but it's not as big of a problem as it's portrayed to be. And I know it's put in the forefront for a reason. They don't want us to connect. They don't want us to understand that we are the same people. They don't want us to think that this is a safe place and this is where we belong. So they're going to put those things to the forefront of our minds. So I just think I just want to appreciate the opportunity to speak on this panel, learn a lot from everyone on the panel, and just continue just to have these conversations. Hey, cutie. So thank you again.
Likewise. You know, Bob Marley said, they don't want to see us unite.
Exactly.
All they want is to see us busting and fighting. YG, Don P. In closing, my good brother.
Yes, Irie. No, definitely. So much wisdom.
Right.
I'd also like to reciprocate what the Queen Oshungumia said, J Cafe, everybody, just thank you for inviting me onto this panel. I've learned a lot. I give gratitude. I honor our ancestors for bringing us together. And just to say, even just what happened right now, it's an African idiom that anytime a child crosses your path, that is a big blessing. So that was a big blessing. There's a reason why even in Kemetic culture, we say we have the most to learn from children, because they come with a purity and an energy that is unmatched, that we are kind of conditioned out of the more we are kept in this lower vibration that we call materialism. But when a child first comes into the world, they come with that purity. That's why children are the most intelligent of any of us. It's why a child who is 2 years old can pick up a language much quicker than anybody. So I'd just like to say peace and blessings to, I don't know if that's your son or blood relative, but, you know, for gracing us with the presence. In terms of, you know, what people can do to awaken themselves, honestly, like I would just say, it's another Kemetic saying, come with an empty cup. Come with an empty cup, because all of us are coming with our prejudices and preconceived notions. But when you come with an empty cup, there's more to fill up. You can take in more. So if you already come with a predisposition of saying, for instance, like even in one of the comments in Brother Samal's videos, there was one brother who was saying, oh, you know, I'm Pan-Africanist, but those East Africans, man, you know, I'm trying to reclaim my Fulani roots. And here is this guy called Don P trying to say that we're all from the Nile River. And I don't know about these East Africans. I am Fulani. That's what he was saying. So even people who think they're awakened still come with their own prejudices and even their traumas, you know. And it's not just our brothers and sisters who were stolen from us to go and build another civilization. Even us, we went through colonization here. We all have traumas. And I think a lot of the you know, the disagreements that we have between, say, African and African American come from a place of arguing from traumatic experiences. And these traumas are ingrained within our genes. So we have to firstly get rid of the traumas. And how we do that is by being honest. And all the information that we have to question why. If you're a Christian, don't just read it as gospel, you know, pardon the pun, that everything is true. You have to ask yourself, why is it, you know? Why is it that there are only 2 books in the Bible who were written by women, Ruth and Esther? You know, where there used to be a book for Mary Magdalene. Why was she written, you know, away from the Bible? There used to be a book called The Gospel of Peace of Jesus Christ. That was removed from the Bible. I've read that book. I read it in London. People don't know this. There's the Gnostic Gospels that were taken away from the Bible, which talk about nature being the true God. That was in the original Bible. There's also Gospels that were taken away that talked about, you know, like the Sermon on the Mount, where, you know, where the, you know, the Lord's Prayer comes from, our Father who art in heaven. People don't know there was a second verse that said, our mother who is the earth. So when we are coming from our different perspectives, whether we're Buddhists, whether we're Christians, whether we're Catholics, always ask yourself, why? You know, why is it that in the old Bible we had a jealous God, but we needed a new God who wasn't jealous and who had to die for us? You have to ask yourself. And that's the biggest trick that religion has played on all of us, is to this whole thing of faith. Don't question, just believe me and you will be saved. That is the mentality of slavery. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend a specific book or books, because, you know, my 2 sisters have already done that. But I would just say it's more of a mindset thing. Question why it is that you believe what you believe, and build on that. And even we're talking about, you know, remembering. There's so much power in words. You know, to remember is not just to recall what happened, it's to remember, to bring us back together, you know, and our culture.
Appreciate it, brother YG, J Cafe, Jessica, Shumbumi. Much love and respect to you, Queen. I just want to say I appreciate all of you for coming on and dropping some nuggets on the family today. Please stay tuned for further content. We will be back live Wednesday. So tune in, family. Peace up, Talu. Peace up. Appreciate you. Appreciate you, Talu. Again, family. So we're gonna close this one out. I got so much in my mind. I don't know why I'm brain freezing right now, Shumbo. But until next time, family, please give us a like, share, and subscribe to the platform. These are the kind of things that we discuss, anything that's pertaining to the Black/African experience. We're going to talk about it. We're going to hash these things out as a family. This is our digital village where we can come together and just hash it out. You have someone in the chat was saying that we're not the same people. Well, that's a different perspective. Our perspective on this panel is that we all family, and we're going to work it out. So until next time, family, peace out. YG, Brother Don P. Ashun Bumi, J Cafe. Appreciate you. Until next time, peace out.